Welcome to the How Soccer Explains Leadership podcast, where we explore leadership principles through the lens of the beautiful game.
Welcome back to How Soccer Explains Leadership. I'm very excited. It's been too long since we've been able to do one of these. We are now in the season 4 halftime show, and I'm sitting here with my brother-in-arms, Paul Jobson. Paul, how you been over the last few months?
Good, man. It's been a long time. We talked on here, but I've seen you since then, at least,
yes.
Right? I mean, we've seen each other face to face, which is we don't get to do hardly ever, so that was cool. And just plugging along here in the final third of the college soccer season. But a lot of cool things have happened on this show since we last talked with the off-season talks and whatnot. We'll get into that, I'm sure. But yeah, things are going well in this part of the country. How about yourself?
Well, you mentioned we got to see each other. I mean, it was like all these things we're talking about on the podcast kind of came together. It was this beautiful summer where we did some disc training with your team. I got a Warrior Way hat. I mean, what the heck? What else do you need? I don't know. You're looking here if you're watching the video. I got a shirt at Baylor. Yeah, got a lot more than that too. So even got some Torchy's tacos while I was in. It wasn't Austin, but it was still in Texas, so that's all right. But yeah, so it was a good time out there with you guys, and was able to. I enjoyed over the summer being able to be a little part of your team and seeing you guys doing well this season.
And having you out too. I mean, this stuff sits on my desk because I prepare for player meetings and whatnot. Got my charts, and just it's been a helpful thing. So I will highly encourage the disc training for teams. It's been helpful for us for sure. So quick plug there, Phil.
Well, hey, I didn't even think that was happening. Don't apologize. That's okay. I condone that message. I too encourage that just because I've seen the impact of it, and I'm glad to hear that it's making the impact that I expected it to. But also, we've had these off-season talks that we did since the last post-match show that you and I did together. Some people are like, you guys have done stuff together because you had these off-season talks, but we never did any of those together. You got to do one with your wife. That was pretty cool. A couple of them with Marcy. Yeah. That was cool.
That was a lot of fun, and not realizing that was her first podcast. I was like, I thought she had done a lot of podcasts, and so we introduced her to the podcast world, and hopefully get her on here with you at some point as well. But that was fun talking to her and just talking through our Warrior Way program and kind of what God's doing through that. Was a cool conversation that we have anyway, but it was fun to do it for other folks.
Yeah, definitely. And folks out there, if you're just kind of tuning in on this to hear the Ted Lasso conversation about episodes 7 and 8, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that in a little bit. But hopefully, if that's the only reason you came on, and this is your first taste of How Soccer Explains Leadership, strongly encourage you to go back and listen to some of the other episodes we've had with some of these amazing guests. We just mentioned those off-season talks, which were kind of a cool little thing we just thought we'd try. And got some really good feedback on those. So go back and listen to those. Those are just little principles, 10, 15-minute episodes where Paul or I talk about these different things that are really important to us. Paul, as he said, talked with Marcy about their Warrior Way program, which is an amazing thing they're doing out there in Waco, and potentially looking to expand across the country. So that's something that's interesting to you. That might be something to be thinking about what might that look like in my community. But beyond that, we have these incredible guests that we're able to get on the show, and this season 4 is no exception to that. We've had Diego Bocanegra at University of Houston. We had Lance Key at University of Louisiana, as well as Will Russell, marketer. He's in Russell Marketing, doing some cool stuff there, but he's also a big, huge fan of the game and played and works with Street Soccer USA as well. And then Tracy Hamm, who's at UC Davis, the women's coach there. She also is one of the few women in the world to have received the UEFA A coaching license. And so I encourage you to go back and listen to those episodes if you haven't done so already. But I also want to just talk with you a little bit, Paul, about the common themes that came out of those as I go back and I just listen to those and I just, read the transcripts and I just, think through some of these big things that are going on in the world of soccer right now. I know that the United Soccer Coach conventions are coming up in the next few months, and I'm sure these things are going to be coming up. Anybody that you talk to who's talking about soccer in the U.S. in particular, but also global, are talking about a lot of these things. And the first one is really just the idea that soccer is becoming a rich man's sport in the U.S. it's become, maybe isn't becoming, it's become really an elitist, so the idea of making high-level youth soccer more accessible to impoverished communities, to people who aren't as wealthy as others, and I know that Diego's episode was actually called "Giving Youth Soccer Back to the Kids," right? And I think you and I have talked about these things as well. What do you think about that? And as you listen to Diego's episodes, you listen to we've talked on Clubhouse with him about this stuff too. And what are your thoughts on that? Just how we can do that if it's an issue, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I think that money is a big part of it, right? It becomes a money grab for you've got a lot of youth coaches that have poured their life into becoming a coach and mentor to young people and find opportunities to make money doing it, and not just a hobby, is attractive to coaches. And I think when that happens, it takes away, it's the haves and the have-nots. The haves can pay for good coaching, and the ones that don't have the money can't pay for it. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to find a way to combine these profitable soccer organizations to reach out to those who can't afford. And that's one thing I think we're trying to do here in Waco. And we're a small community. We're not a big massive city like a Dallas or Austin or Atlanta or something like that. But how can we combine our quote-unquote professional coaches in the league that we're doing, organization we're doing, so that they can still make some money, but how can we bring in kids who can't afford access to what we're doing as well? And I think we've got to do a better job of finding those opportunities in our local communities. And I think if each local community can commit just to their zip code, or their local areas, I think we can make a massive impact. But I remember growing up and playing club soccer with volunteer coaches. We talked about our parents coaching us. My dad didn't get paid to coach me, and I played select soccer with him until I was probably 15 or 16 years old at a high level. And so, I think those models can still exist, but how to exactly do that, I think that's another thing with our country. I think everybody has a different idea, but I think, instead of getting caught up in how do we do it, let's just take some steps forward in our local communities and see, like Diego's doing, like a lot of us are doing in our own little communities. And I think also getting the word out. I think there are a lot of people doing some really, really good things, but you just don't hear about it. You're just hearing about the kids that come through the club system that, and find their way through it. But it's not about, the kids that are playing on the national team that come from poor communities. That's not why we're in this. We're in this to develop young people into, people that can contribute positively to our society. And can we develop some great soccer players through it as well? Sure we can, but I don't think that can be our absolute end goal.
Well, and I think you hit on something there too, is the idea that when we have these clubs that cost a lot of money, the coaches are expected to teach soccer the entire time, right? And I think, and that's not a terrible thing to get to be a great soccer player, but the vast majority, I think I just saw a stat the other day, only 7% of all kids playing youth sports will ever play in college anywhere, whether JC on up to D1. So that is something that when we were kids and the parents were the coaches, it was clear that the parents had a vested interest in the character of those kids because they're their kids and they're their friends' kids. But now with coaches who are training, and their job is to train soccer, not to train the individual and to train character and leadership and all the things we talk about on this show that we got to learn and that we get to implement in our lives outside the game. A lot of those lessons aren't being taught at the youth soccer, at the youth sports level. And part of it too that we also talked about in these interviews was the specialization that's happening so early. And I think that's part of it too, is we're not playing on different teams. We're not playing with different coaches. We're not playing different sports that will teach different lessons, that will teach, will help avoid burnout, that will help avoid overuse injuries, that will also help avoid, I don't think it's an accident that we're seeing more and more conversation about mental health and issues there with the youth sports, the clubs the way they are, the specialization so early, the pressure on these kids to play a game at this high level super early. Man, it's just this compounding effect of all these things that come together. Throw in a little bit of entitlement, right? That's going on in our communities, that we just think we deserve these things because we grow up in a certain zip code, or we do a certain thing, or we have certain parents, or we are, we've always been the best player. Not that you've ever experienced that as a college coach, where people might come in and struggle because they used to always be the best, and now they're just one of many bests. And some of those best players won't play a minute in their 4 years. So how do we take all that and go, okay, like you said, there are steps. And what are the things we can celebrate that you've seen? Some different, baby steps we can take toward getting back to where, I'm not saying it was perfect when we were kids. There were a lot of issues, a lot of problems, a lot of, there were parent coaches who were not the best people in the world and who weren't teaching all those lessons either.
Yeah,
right?
Listen, let's realize that, a lot of the reasons that we've come to professional coaches in these leagues is because we've had so many volunteer parent coaches that weren't the answer either. So
yes.
It's not like there's one substitutes the other in a perfect
right.
world. Let's be honest. We've got to find a balance there, and it's always about balance. But I think when we talk about specialization as well, conversation the other day with a kid, I've got a former player of mine that's doing some lessons with a 9-year-old, and she's been introduced to the club soccer program, and she loves soccer, but she does not like her select soccer program. And the parents said, "What do we do? Do we just push her to because that's where she's going to get the best training?" But she just doesn't like it. She doesn't push herself. She doesn't compete. She'd rather play in the rec league. And our answer was, well, she's 9. What does she enjoy? Well, she enjoys the rec league. I said, well, does she enjoy her private lessons? Well, yeah. I said, does she get quality coaching from her private lessons? Well, yeah. So you want quality coaching and you want her to have fun? You don't need select soccer at 9 years old. What's the goal of the select soccer program right now? It sounds to me like that's going to push her out of soccer. She hates it. So I said, if she wants to continue playing soccer, she's at an age where she can still have fun. And at the end of the day, the kid's, probably not trending to be a world all-star, but, she won't be for sure if she drops out. Yeah. But she still has an opportunity to grow and develop if she has people pouring into her, and, she'll have more fun and maybe get better because she's enjoying the process. And I think, I've got, we're a soccer family. I've got 4 boys. 1, they all play soccer. 1 also plays football. 2 play baseball. They need to enjoy other things, I think, because it'll help them decide, what do they really want to do? And I like the influence of other people. I love the fact that I go to the baseball park. And listen, I'm the only American boy that never played baseball, okay? I mean, call me whatever name you want to. That's fine. But my older brother played it. He hated it, so I never played. But my boys love it. And I love the impact that those coaches have on them. I just sit back and laugh and cheer them on because I don't know enough, and it's fun. So I think without allowing your kids to try other things, they're missing out on opportunities to see what God-given talent they actually have. And maybe none of my kids play college athletics in any sport. I'm fine with that. That's not a problem for me and Marcy. And I think that there's too much pressure on kids to be great. I want them to work hard. I want them to be good teammates. I want them to honor their coaches and respect their coaches. And what grows out of that will be awesome. And that's not up to me. But I think it's tough to see so many kids being pushed to do things that maybe they do or don't like. I get kids that walk in my door here that they get here and they finally realize they have decisions to make and that they can make decisions. And they realize, hey, I don't really like soccer that much. It was always just a tool to get to college, and I did it. And now I'm kind of like, okay, what's the point now? I've gotten to college. I've got a scholarship. I like to play, but I don't love it. And that's a tough thing to see those kids that have just been pushed by their parents to play for a scholarship or do something maybe they didn't have any input. And I think that we missed something there with that. And I know I've kind of gone on about it, but I think it's an important topic that we talk about for our kids. And you talk about stress and mental health. Also don't allow my kids to quit. If they've committed to something, we're going to do it through the season. We get to the end of the season, we make some decisions, but we're not going to be quitters either. So just some things I think as a community and as a soccer culture, I know we've talked with folks that there's a soccer league was in Houston that he has a soccer coach put him through basketball in the winter, right? They play basketball. The soccer coaches coach basketball. I think that's an amazing idea. I think it's awesome. Get those kids doing other things and see how they, maybe it's not their best sport, but put the best player from a soccer team on a basketball team, let them struggle a little bit. You know, like you were saying, for these kids that end up in college, they've all been the best of the best. And then they get here and cream rises to the top, and some of the best players in their youth programs are at the bottom of the roster, and that's a tough thing to take because they've never experienced it in anything else in their life. So I think these are things we need to think about as not just as parents but as coaches. How do we encourage our players to go through a little bit of struggle and strife so that they're during a time where we can actually help them through those things.
Yeah, I think some of the things we talk about on this show that we're hoping will come through is, personally, and I'm not going to speak for everybody who's listening or has been on the show, but I'd much rather train up through these clubs great people than great players. Right? You want both, of course. But if we are just pushing through a bunch of people who can kick a ball well and have a great first touch and have, be able to, hit it strong with both feet and who, know the game and know the different formations and know all, but are jerks in the world, like, what are we doing? Right? So that's where I think, and I'm not saying that that's what clubs are doing, but I think that we need to put more effort and energy into the whole person, the whole player, the whole thing. Otherwise, the message being sent will be that soccer is everything, or plug in the sport is everything, and all these other things are cool if you can do them, which I think is what's leading to a lot of the mental health issues that are out there. There's so much, it's a pressure cooker, literally. I know some of my kids' friends and teammates are having anxiety attacks and panic attacks. My daughter, when she was 8, it was pumped up so much to go to Southern California and play in tournaments. She got there and hyperventilated on the field. And we, thought she might have asthma because she couldn't breathe. But I'm like, she couldn't breathe after like a minute on the field. That's not an asthma attack. That's something else going on, right? And what the heck, right? Like, what? That's insane. It's completely insane. But these 8-year-olds are feeling that pressure. And if 8-year-olds are feeling it, then 18-year-olds who are getting paid money to do this. I was listening to another podcast recently, and it was talking about the idea that people's maturity and character is not equal to the position that they're put in and the leadership that they're given too early. And I think too often we're putting these kids into positions that their maturity and their character is not developed yet to be able to make these decisions. We're expecting 17, 18-year-olds to make adult decisions when we haven't prepared them for that at all.
Yeah, I think that the point of the preparation piece is critical, is that, they get to a certain age and they're like, oh, you're an adult. Well, you've not allowed them as a kid. I was just saying this a minute ago, like, allow kids to make decisions that in their mind seem big while they have the hand-holding opportunity of a parent or a coach to help them through that decision process. And you're right. Kids or young adults are being put in leadership positions they're not ready for because they've never had to actually lead. They've never actually had to make decisions or feel the repercussions of a good or bad decision, and in a safe way, right? In a safe way as a young person. I think those are things that we struggle with as parents, is try to put our kids in situations where they can either succeed or fail based on their decisions. But failing isn't detrimental to their life or detrimental to their future careers. It's little things here and there. What are the decisions that you're going to make on a daily basis to do or not do? But I think that's how we have to prepare. I mean, let's not forget, we're not too far away from a generation where kids were working on their parents' farms as soon as they could walk and lift a shovel. And by the time they were 15, they were running the farm. So we're not far from that. We're not that far from those generations, but we're at a point now where we've got 22 and 23-year-olds that are entering the world who don't have a clue. They don't know what to do when their boss tells them they've done a bad job, because through college, everyone just protected them. So some things that, that comes to entitlement. We're encouraging that entitlement of like, hey, I can kind of do whatever. I'll be fine and I'll be protected. And at some point that disappears, and we've got to prepare young people for that environment moving forward. And that can start as young as whatever a kid's comfortable with or our family is comfortable with. But I think if we're turning it to coaches, we've got to put kids in situations in training where they do fail. If you've got a great player that is just dominating, can you find an opportunity on another team in a training environment where they're not going to be the best player? our girls, when we send them off for the summer, we say, hey, can you maybe not go back to the younger girls teams in your club? Can you find an older men's team to play with where it's going to be really hard for you to be successful? When you have success, you'll realize, man, I had to work extremely hard for that. So creating opportunities and environments for young people to succeed and fail, I think, is where we're kind of missing the boat. We're trying to protect, we're in that, kind of pillowcase and pillows where we're just protecting everybody from falling down and skimming their knee. Sometimes you need to skim your knee.
Yeah.
So,
It's funny you say that because it's will be a good transition to the Ted Lasso conversation. We're going to be talking about season 1 still. I realize when this releases, season 2 will have been out for months. So we're going to talk about that later. But there is this one little thing that reminded me of it when you said that, is when Isaac is struggling and in season 2, and Ted asks Roy to help him out, and he takes him out to the field and basically gets knocked down by these dudes out in the men's league, and he's like, "What's going on? What are you doing?" And basically making it tough, making it hard to succeed. What does that look like? How can we do that? And I think that you are, with the Warrior Way, teaching these principles early on. How can we intentionally incorporate principles into the teaching and the coaching and the clinics and these different things that we're doing that are beyond just the X's and O's of the game, right? That are beyond these things. There are ways we can do that. It can be a both and. Like you said, parents are not the answer. Heck, how many different meetings do we have to have because parents are completely gone off the reservation with a lot of these things, right? So I'm not saying that parent coaches are the answer. That could be even worse sometimes, because then there's all kinds of other issues. But what I am saying is there are principles that we talk about on this show. The reason we do this show is because there are things we can learn from this game that can help us through everything we do in life. But this game could also be, like I said, a cauldron that people come out of worse for the wear. And man, what a shame that is when I see these kids hating the game at 16, 17 years old. And it's not the game they're hating, it's everything that came with it. And some of them 5, 10 years later get back into it and just have a joy that you've never seen before because they see it as a game again, right? Where you can learn stuff from. So with that, there's this great show that we've been talking about, Ted Lasso, which won every Emmy I think they could have won, and except for the ones they had the same people in for, whatever. And that shows that it was good acting, it was good writing. But what we're talking about here are the leadership lessons we can get from it. And so we're talking about today is episodes 7 and 8. We talked a little earlier. These are kind of the dramatic episodes, right? I mean, it's a comedy, but it's a drama comedy. A lot of the breakdowns, a lot of the the other things that it's like, man, this is heavy. But there are a couple little tidbits that I want to talk about and see what you want to bring out too. But at the beginning of episode 7, it was right after Jamie Tartt was basically sent back to Manchester City. He was on loan, and they took him back because he wasn't playing. Ted wasn't playing for a couple games. And the reporters ask him, they say, "Hey, Ted, what do you think about Tartt going back to Man City?" And he says, it actually breaks my heart a little. I think one of the neatest things about being a coach is the connection you get to make with your players. That's a loss that hits me a lot harder and is going to stay with me a lot longer than anything happens while playing a game on a patch of grass. What do you think about that?
It hits home, for sure. I mean, I think that, the majority of the coaches that get into coaching, they're in it for the relationships with the players. They're not, at least not initially, in it for the wins and the losses. Well, for the wins, they're not in it for the losses for sure, but they're definitely not getting into it for the wins. They're not getting into it for the pay. They're getting into it for the relationships. At some point, they recognize relationship that they had with a coach, a mentor, that they want to pass on. And I think that does a great job with that. And I think that it's one of the things, I think, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier, is that I think as coaches, I think we always need to self-check ourselves as to why we're doing what we do. And, why did I get into this? And am I still in it for the same reason? Do I need to be in it for the same reason? But I think, it's the relationships. I've always said that a coach that has a hard time walking away from a team, like in transition, another opportunity, if it's easy, I don't think they've been doing it the right way. If it's hard, it should be hard to leave, even if it's a better opportunity somewhere else. it should be hard to break those bonds with those players if you've been doing it the right way. And I think I totally felt for Ted, because we've all had players that have left. Either they've transferred for one reason or another, or they've had a career-ending injury and had to stop playing, or even just through graduation. There's certain kids you're like, gosh, I'm just not ready for that kid to leave yet. So I think it kind of epitomizes what and why we all, at least initially, get into coaching or for those relationships.
Yeah, and as I think about taking this to the world outside the game too, right? I mean, if we're doing it right, I think it does become like a family. It becomes like, it's a group, it's a community. I think about it like the churches that I've been a part of. And I remember when I was leaving a church in Atlanta, the one that we helped launch, we were part of the launch team of this church. So that was a small group. It was probably 30 or 40 people that were just, we became like family to them, still are. People I still talk with and connect with. And when the pastor of that church was driving me to the airport, and he says, Phil, when you leave a church, it should feel like a divorce. It should hurt. It should be something that there's pain, and we were going to California. We weren't going to a different church or whatever in Atlanta. We were going to California, moving, and it was right, and it was good, and it was exactly what we were supposed to be doing. And 17 years later now, I can say the same thing like that. Yes, it was right and good, but it still hurt, right? It was this because something you're leaving something that you're a part of, right? And so to hear that, and the other thing I like about that quote is he said, is the connection you get to make with your players, right? It was a get to versus have to. This thing I think we've talked about on the show. If we haven't, then if we see things as have tos, I have to go to work, I have to go coach, I have to do this, I have to do that, I have to make relationships with my players, it's going to be a duty thing and you're going to burn out. It's not going to be something that's going to last. When you see it as get to, it changes everything. It changes everything.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it gets back to the point of, I think that's where we have to continually check ourselves as coaches, or business leaders or whatever it is, kind of what you're mentioning is that once it becomes a have to, then, kind of the effect that you're going to have on those around you is going to be a lot different, because you kind of feel like you're being forced to do something as opposed to you choosing to do it. And I think that there's a big difference in that, and that's a good point that you've made there, Phil.
So the other thing it talks about, or that it hits on, doesn't necessarily talk about it, is, we as coaches are coaching, well, hopefully we're coaching ourselves, right? Hopefully there's a self-leadership. As John Maxwell said, the hardest person to coach is yourself, or to lead is yourself, I think was his actual thing, but we're going to talk about coaching here. And then there's coaching the team, which we all know. We put we have their whiteboards and we talk about formations and we do the starting lineups. But then there's this idea of coaching the player, the individual, that there's a bunch of individuals on the team that if we're not coaching each of them well, it's going to be hard to coach the team well. And there will be breakdown, and there will be conflict, there will be issues. It's why we did the disc training, right? The idea of disc training is you understand self first, then you can understand others, then you can work together better, and you can have better performance as a team, right? But if it doesn't start with the self, and then if it doesn't start with you understanding each of those individual players, as you talked about, you go into team, one-on-one meetings, you go into talking to the players. If there's conflicts, we can refer to these things. But it's coaching the player, right? And how important have you seen that being over the years in your coaching, that importance of understanding each individual that makes up this greater team?
Well, I think it's crucial, those individual relationships. I think the times that we've slipped away from making that important are years that we've struggled, maybe not instantly, but at least in the long run. And I think we do a good job. I think we see the importance of getting to know players individually, because I think if you're coaching, a team, and you're just coaching the team, you may get to a couple people based on your personality, maybe matching theirs, but you're going to miss more than you hit. And I think you've got to understand each kid and how what are their hot buttons, what are the things that motivate them, and what are the things that shut them down. And recognizing those things and having a good read on each individual to know maybe you've said something to the team as a whole that has gotten to the majority, but there are a couple that maybe don't understand what you've said, and you approach them separately because you know them well enough to know, okay, they didn't get that message. And I think understanding as a coach that a lot of times when you're talking to a team, the points that you're making to the team are usually for a couple of different people, and usually those aren't the ones that hear it. You're making a tough point to the team, and the ones that need to hear it have their ears off, and the ones that think you're talking to them, you're not talking to them. So you've got to hone in on those individual needs and concerns of the players. But most importantly, and this goes to a lot of what we're talking about goes into the disc things, is that you got to know yourself as a coach too, and you got to know how you're coming across, how your communication style is coming out of your mouth, because you're going to hear it. You're going to hear yourself one way, and the others are going to hear you differently. So you need to know how you're speaking, how you communicate, and obviously part of communication is talking. The other side is listening. So how are you listening to what others are saying also? As a coach, it's not just about you doing what I'm doing right now and talking a lot. There's a lot of listening involved as well. So, but that individual relationship is crucial. And we talked about it a bit ago where there's certain kids you build great relationships and they're going on to take on their life. You're excited for them, but at the same time, you're like, wow, we have a great relationship. We're going to miss this piece of it here. I'm excited about what you're going on to do, but we'll miss that piece of them here.
So there's a lot of drama in these episodes, going back to episode 7, 8, right? So Ted's dealing with his divorce. He's going through the divorce papers, has a mental breakdown, and lashes out at some of his coaches, players, whatever. And, that was one thing that I saw. It's a pretty simple thing, but something we don't do very often, is when we're unhealthy, going back to personality style, when we're unhealthy in our personality style, the flip side of that personality that Ted has is, the very high, very low lows, right? And in those low lows, and I get it, I'm probably wired very similar to that character, right? And those low lows, you tend to lash out at people. And I don't know if you remember in the episode, Nate comes to his door and he's like, hey, I'm coming to give you the thoughts that you asked me for. And he just yells at him and says, just get away, just get out. It's late or whatever. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he basically just kicked him out. But what he did, which was really cool, which just doesn't happen often enough, is when he realized it, when he was self-aware and realized I just lashed out at him, he went and apologized. He owned it. He took responsibility. He didn't just say, hey, I'm the leader, I can do that. Forget all those other people. He said, I blew it, And how many times have I know have talked about this in our parenting, in our marriages, the power of the I'm sorry, the power of the apology. Even if the other person did a bunch of things to deserve it, it doesn't matter. Maybe he did come too late. Maybe it should have been something he should have done earlier, but that doesn't matter. I blew it, right? And I know my kids have come back to me and said that meant a lot. Thank you. But how have you seen that play out? What do you think about that?
Well, I think as a leader, he's modeling something very important that we hope. And you talk about in parenting or leadership, whether it's a team or a business or whatever, you're modeling the behavior that you want to see within your organization. And I think it's important to also understand as a leader, and this gets back to knowing the people that you work with, knowing your players, knowing their personalities, they're going to have those moments too. And where a player may lash out and you've got to understand, okay, that's not normal. Let's get to the root of that, and let's figure out what that looks like. And that's a teachable moment where if they're not coming back to apologize, there's a moment to bring someone in and say, hey, I understand maybe something's going on. That's not you. It's not what I've traditionally come to think I get from you as a player or a worker or whatever. So while we understand ourselves can be that way, we've got to be compassionate to those around us. And that's why it's important that if we do that, we are modeling what we want them to do also. So that apology, that bringing them in to say, hey, I totally messed up on that one. I apologize. Can you forgive me? That sort of thing. So I think that's important that he's modeling what he would expect of his players. And I think we have an opportunity as leaders to do that as well, and parents.
Absolutely, bosses. Whatever. Right? In any relationship you have, it's such a powerful. Really, you've seen movies, you've seen things, and you've seen probably in your own life. Sometimes it's even hard to say that word because it is powerful, right? You see it's joke around, I can't say it, whatever. You've seen that. I've seen it. I'm not going to put that on you that you've seen it, but I'm assuming you have. You just see that. It's like that and I love you are probably the two things that are really powerful, and I think it's really interesting that those two things are probably the hardest things for people to say because what they're both vulnerable words. Right? They put yourself out there. I'm sorry says in those two words, I was wrong. I blew it. I need to do things differently. Like that's a lot of stuff to lay out there, right? I love you obviously has a bunch of other stuff too. But that's something that I saw in that. And so, these two episodes also have two of my favorite scenes in all of Ted Lasso. See if you can guess what they are. Do you have any idea what I'm referring to?
I don't know where you're going with that one. You got to enlighten
You don't? Oh, man. Okay. All right. So one is a locker room scene. Do you know what I'm talking about now?
You got to keep
Before
going.
the Everton game. So before the Everton game, when Nate did come and give him his thoughts, Ted said...
Oh, yes. Nate,
So what am I
Nate
talking
actually
about?
Giving his thoughts.
Yes. He says, you're giving the pregame talk. So what this did, yes, the pregame talk was pretty awesome. He basically just roasted everyone, laid everyone out, and I love Danny Rojas. Roast me. But, he's like tough but fair. But he laid into it wasn't so much what he said. What the lessons that I took out of it from a leadership perspective, one was Ted empowering him to do it and saying, you can do this. No. Yes, you can. Go. You can do this. The other thing I saw was Roy, when he comes up to Roy Kent and he starts, he was reading everything, and Roy takes the paper, crumples it up, throws it down, and says, look me in the eye and say it to my face. Tell me what you think. And it was this idea of, this is what leaders do. This is what, if you're going to be my coach and I'm going to respect you, you need to actually not be just reading, hiding behind a paper, but you need to share from your heart. You need to share what you really believe, and you need to tell me to my face. I think there were power in both of those things, and I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on that from the coach side.
Yeah, I mean, he was empowered not only by Ted, but by Roy, right? And that's what you're saying. I mean, you think in the moment that Roy is stepping up to, like, hey, say it to my face, and I'm gonna knock you out. But at the end of the day, he turns around to the team and is like, let's go, right? I mean, that's kind of what ends up happening. So that empowerment moment for him is huge. He got the support of not only of the coach, but of the captain, and you also see that kind of in that moment too, and it's been building. But you see in that moment also, Ted and Roy are on the same page.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're seeing that community come together and that bond that as it's shaping through the season, you're seeing more and more of that. But as a coach, you're looking for as a coach, you're not only building up players, but there's times where you're coaching coaches. And I think that in that's saying that someone's always watching what you're doing. It's not just your players, it's your coaches. How do you manage your coaches? How do you communicate with them? Finding the right moments to empower them. Had he done that earlier in the season when, he was being made fun of a ton, it wouldn't have worked out. But he had slowly given him responsibilities and slowly given him, it wasn't like he just showed up that day and made him talk to the team. That was a gradual process that we can't look past also. Is it managing those responsibilities when someone's ready to take them? And I think that's a pretty cool scene. I'd kind of forgotten about that one.
Yeah. And also, I mean, we talked about this before. Sometimes the messenger is as important as the message. Who says something? If Ted would have said all those things, or Roy would have said all those things, or, maybe if Ted did, but like if Beard would have said those things, it wouldn't have had the same impact. But because it's this dude who's the equipment boy turned, whatever, it was powerful. And so I think that was something as well that, sometimes you as the coach, pass the mic to somebody else. Give that other person the opportunity to say things, because first of all, it will empower them. Secondly, it might have way more impact than, I know when my wife gets on the upset side and starts yelling, it has much more impact than when Dad, who yells often, believe it or not, I yell in my house. I mean, I know it shocks you.
Yes.
So yeah, but it happens every so often. But when she does it, it has more impact because it doesn't happen as often. And so I think that that's something that we need to take as leaders to say, all right, sometimes pass the mic, sometimes just give the opportunity, give the stage to somebody else, whether it's halftime talks, whether pregame talks, whether it's during practice, whether it's whatever. You don't have to be the mouthpiece all the time, and you shouldn't be the mouthpiece all the time. And as you've done on your team and those one-on-one meetings, coaching the players to understand who are the people that connect the best with each player, let's go with them, and let's assign them to those people, and that's the empowering. It's delegation. It's not abdication. Delegation is critical component to great leadership. So the kind of going into episode 8, and we're going to finish up pretty quick. We're going to finish up quicker on this episode. But one of the things that you can't miss, well, you can miss it, but it's hard to miss, is that Ted has the Pyramid of Success on his wall. I think we've talked about it before, but they actually go up to it in that episode and focus on it, and somebody looks at it. That was something that his coach in high school talked a lot about, John Wooden and the Pyramid of Success. Jason Sudeikis' coach, not Ted Lasso's. And that's one of the things that he said, I want to make sure that's there, because that was, I thought, really cool, that he's a guy who playing a role of a coach who has an impact on these players. And this actor, his high school coach, had such an impact on him that he remembers this thing, that he wants to honor him. And he basically, a lot of the character is based on this guy, just the way he cared deeply about the players. And that's the impact a coach can have, right?
Yeah, and I think I mentioned it earlier, sometimes people get into coaching because of a relationship they had with a coach, saw the impact, and they want to replicate that. But it doesn't have to show up in coaching, right? I mean, he's doing it as an actor. He's doing it, there are a lot of great business leaders that take examples from their coaches growing up in whatever sport they played, and take those lessons into the corporate world. And I think that's something that we miss, again, going back to, if we think that if we're doing it just for the player that comes through and ends up on a national team or plays professionally, then we're missing 99% of the kids that grew up to be people impacting our communities in probably more impactful ways, quite honestly, than the professional athlete. And I think that's something we've got to grab hold of. And I think that's why it's so important, again, just looping all the way back around to impacting our communities for those who can't afford the coaching. Those kids need those influences maybe even more. And they need those positive mentors in their lives so that they can go on and be positive impacts in their community, and whether it's a professional athlete or just whatever it is that God has for them. But I think that's kind of a full circle piece there. Phil, well done for that. But I think it is cool to see Sudeikis kind of realizing the impact that a coach had on his life, and honoring that man through this character is pretty cool. And I think it gives us a great perspective as coaches to remember that there's 99% of the players that we're coaching that are not going to go on to be professional athletes, and are going to impact our communities in one way, shape, or form. And we have a massive responsibility to be a positive impact on them.
Yeah. I mean, think about that high school coach. He had no idea that coaching high school basketball was going to end up turning into this actor who gets this job as a coach that's going to take the world by storm, right? That's pretty cool. I wish I was smart enough to have intentionally done that full circle, but thanks for being a great teammate and bringing it that home. All right, 2 more things. One is just an aside. One of my favorite quotes was Danny Rojas. I mean, it's not this guy. I love this dude. I mean, who doesn't like Danny Rojas? But when Keeley's talking to him about what kind of products he wants to be the sponsor for, and he goes, I like products that spread joy to others. And she's like, well, I don't know how much that will pay. And he says, I like to give away joy for free. Right? So it was this. But it was really funny, but at the same time, it's like we need those players on our teams. We need those players who will give away joy for free and will encourage others to be joyful and to remember the fun side, remember the joy that should be coming out of this game. So that was just a little aside. And then the last thing.
More Danny Rojases.
Oh, yes, especially if they're really good like him. And that's always a bonus. But the last thing is, but remember that highs and lows of that personality style, as we see in season 2 as well with Danny, but not to get ahead of ourselves. All right, the last thing, one of my other scenes of the Ted Lasso series is the dart game with Rupert that Ted had, where Rupert, they basically have a bet about Rupert being in the owner's box, and either he can't be there or he gets to pick the next 2 starting lineups. And Ted says, they go through the whole game. It turns out he played a lot of darts as a kid, and at the end he says, I've been underestimated my entire life. They used to bother me until I saw a Walt Whitman quote when I was driving my kid to school one day. It said, be curious, not judgmental. If people were curious, they'd ask things like, did you play a lot of darts as a kid, Ted? Right? And so it was a cool scene, but I like that idea of be curious. It's really that humble posture that we've talked about. In that scene, Rupert, the ex-husband of the owner of the club, clearly did not have a curious, humble posture coming into that game. He thought, I'm a better dart player. This guy's an idiot. There's no way he can beat me. And we get that way. As how many games have you lost that you should have won, or come out with a draw that you should have won? And how many games have you won that you should have lost, right? Because and how many of those times was it because you went in overconfident? You went in not curious about, maybe maybe a couple of these players are playing out of their minds right now. Maybe they match up better against us. That's what scouting's all about, right? Is this humble posture of, this is something that we can't make assumptions about people based on different things that we just assume, or that we're judging them because they came from a certain background, or they came from a certain club, or they're whatever it is, right? There's not only outliers, but there's also, people people surprise us, right? And that's a good thing. That's a good thing. But how have you seen that play out as far as that idea of be curious, not judgmental in coaching and recruiting and life?
Yeah, it's all over the place here. I think that's a huge thing, I think, in relationships. And I think if that's that is kind of what we're doing here, is we're building relationships with players, not just us and players, but players and players. And seeing that play out of, you've got a stud kid that's coming, a lot built up about her coming in. And, the initial thing before the girls usually get to know that player is, she's going to be a certain way because she's the star. The coaches have have high expectations of her, and they're building her up and whatnot, and making sure they're giving her a chance to see whether they really like her or not. And more times than not, they end up being a great kid, and it ends up being fine. But you see that a lot with kids coming in. They're being sized up by the veterans before they even walk in the door. And we try to measure that and temper that and start building those relationships early on. But we can do that as coaches too. We can build up, players in our minds to be a certain way. And again, not asking enough questions, not finding out what really makes them tick, and not really finding out the best ways to communicate with them so that we can set them up for success. So being curious is a definite big time impactful statement when building relationships.
Definitely. All right, man. Well, another Ted Lasso halftime show that was about half Ted Lasso, so maybe that's appropriate, is coming to a close. It's always bittersweet. Love these conversations with you. Love being able to share these thoughts with you folks out there. And as we wrap up, we talk about wanting to engage more with you, and I will tell you folks that some of our guests are people just that have reached out and asked some questions, and I got to know them and said, hey, this would be a great conversation. You want to be on the show? Others are people that have reached out and said, hey, there's this person that I think you should interview, and I've been able to interview them, and it's been amazing conversations. And also just people asking questions that I've become friends with and helping them in different ways with different questions, and they've helped me with different things. And again, that be curious idea, it often starts with just sending an email or, and reaching out in some way. And I encourage you to do that. Reach out to me, Phil at howsoccerexplainsleadership.com. Would love to chat with you about any of these issues we're talking about. If you have some questions about, your journey in the soccer world, or your kids, or things in your leadership as a organizational leader, and your different areas of your life, I'd love to be able to connect with you. And if it's something Paul can help out with, we can reach out to him as well. But it's something that we take it seriously. We're not just doing this to get download numbers. We're doing this to make relationships and to connect with people, and hopefully encourage and inspire and equip you to be able to take everything you're doing to the next level, whether it's leading different things, whether it's in your marriages, in your parenting, in your soccer game, whatever it is. That's our hope for this. So with that, reach out to us on the email, join the Facebook group, rate and review the show so more people can hear about it. The most that you can be doing, the biggest thing you can be doing to spread this show is, if it's helping you, share it with some people that you think it will help. Share it with people in your club. Share it with people that you work with, because I know it's helped me to interview these people I've been able to talk with. I know it helps me to have these conversations with Paul. So hopefully it's helping you as well. And I encourage you to share that with people that you know. And with that, I do hope that you're... Oh, and also, the last thing, I'm going to talk about Warrior Way. Look that up with Paul. Paul, remind me of the website on that.
It's jobsonsoccer.com.
All right, jobsonsoccer.com is Paul's last name, soccer.com. And then the disc training. If it's something that you are interested in, the disc, model of human behavior, you heard us talk a little bit about it here. If you're at all interested in that, send me an email at that same email address I talked about earlier. And with that, I hope that you're taking all that you're learning from this show and you're using it to help you be a better leader, a better parent, a better spouse, and a better everything that you're doing. And we do hope that you're taking what you're learning from this show, and it is reminding you that soccer really does explain life and leadership. Thanks a lot. Have a great week.